And the Lindsay Kimono, wait, 45, let me check my price, sorry.
So during one of her recent Facebook Live broadcasts, Barbie accidentally broke one of our studio softbox lights, and these things aren't cheap, so I guess I'm just gonna have to crack it open and see what the problem is and see if I can repair it. Wish me luck. The first thing to do, really, is to give the light a quick visual inspection to see if anything is obviously wrong with it. Well, this severed wire might just be the culprit. Looks like it got ripped out of the switch box in the crash, so we'll just have to open her up and see if there's any more damage. I'll use my handy-dandy warranty voiders to gently but firmly pry the switch box open. These are a great tool for working on electronics, and I highly recommend having a pair in your toolbox. I'll put a link to them in the doobly-doo. Just keep working on the two halves of the switch box until they come apart, exposing the switch mechanism. It looks like both wire leads became disconnected from the switch terminals, so we'll just have to fix both sides. Let's peel a little extra wire back from each of the switch leads so we have some more wire to work with and clean up the exposed wire a little bit. I'll use my strippers to cut off a little more insulation, so I've got plenty of wire to work with. Then just go ahead and twist the strands to make it nice and clean. Before we go any further, I'll just test everything to make sure it'll still fit inside the switch housing. Looks good. Now to reattach the leads. The switch leads were originally crimped on this thing when it was assembled, so I'm going to quickly see if I can pry the terminals open. It's worth a shot, even if it's a long one. I'm going to use one of my Piccolo flathead screwdrivers to attempt to pry the crimped terminal back open. Alas, it is of no use. I guess I'll just have to go on to plan B then. It's not an elegant solution to be sure, but for this situation, I'm just gonna have to solder the leads to the terminals directly. I don't like the idea of doing this, mostly because the solder doesn't readily bond to the steel switch terminal, so I don't think it's gonna hold too strongly. I can reinforce that later though. The most difficult part of this solder job is actually getting it to stick to the switch terminal. The solder I'm using prefers to attach itself to the hot tip of the iron because the switch assembly acts like a heatsink and just makes the terminal too cool. Well, eventually I got a generous blob of solder to bond and freeze on each terminal, so now I can tend the tips of each lead wire and solder them onto the terminals. The first lead was pretty easy, but because of the tight tolerances inside the switch box, I needed to hold the second wire down pretty close to the solder joint. Instead of potentially exposing my fingertips to a 750-degree soldering iron, I opted to hold this lead down with a pair of tweezers. Again, I'll put links to all the tools I'm using in the doobly-doo, just in case you need some. With both leads soldered back onto their terminals, I'll just run a quick continuity check with the multimeter. Make sure you do this check with the switch closed and the test probes contacting the copper wire to make sure that your solder joints are conducting appropriately. Everything checks out so far, so I just need to stuff the return wire back into the switch housing and press the two halves back together. Before I finish though, I'm going to reinforce these solder joints with a liberal application of hot snot. I generally hate when manufacturers do this because it makes things harder to work on, but I just don't trust the solder to do the job on its own. With the hot glue cooled and solidified, you just press the two halves of the switch box back together, plug her in, and give her a quick function check. Disco! So repairing this light turned out to be a lot easier than I expected, so that's great. Now I have two studio lights to work with again. Yay! Now, if you like to see more how-tos, repairs, and teardown videos like this one, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to hit the bell notification icon. And let me know down in the doobly-doo what you would like to see me repair next time. Until then, tally-ho, y'all.